We can.
Okay, so welcome to this hybrid in-person and remote event we're calling Solidarity from within the belly of the beast, opposing imperialism and supporting sovereignty. And we have speakers from, and this is sovereignty with the Venezuelan people, I think I said that. I'm Juliana, or Julie Barnett, and Leonardo will be introducing the other speakers who are from Venezuela and from the United States. And we will be talking about both the current situation in Venezuela and about the nature of solidarity, and thinking about what it is to be in solidarity with a people that we, at the same time that we are in the belly of the beast, we are denizens of this beast, this imperialist power that is at this moment and for some decades threatening and, being doing both threatening and in active aggression and blockade against the people of Venezuela. So we will be now introducing the speakers.
Great. So our first speaker tonight is going to be Vanessa Perez, who is a spokesperson for the Cinco Fortalezas commune, which is in the northeastern state of Sucre, which borders the Caribbean Sea. She belongs to the National Steering Committee of the Communard Union Movement and as the Unión Comunera, and as a representative to the communal parliament. She has brought the voice of Venezuelan communes to the Movimiento Sin Tierras, the landless movement of Brazil, international brigades in Spain, and to the US. Should I introduce them all? And then, okay, yeah, let's introduce all the speakers and then we'll go from there. The second speaker will be myself, Leonardo Flores. I'm from Venezuela, founding member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network. I previously worked as an organizer with Code Pink and also as an analyst at the Venezuelan embassy here in Washington, D.C. After that, we're going to have Professor Steve Elner. Professor Elner taught at the Universidad de Oriente in Venezuela, where he lived for over 40 years. He's currently the associate managing editor of the journal Latin American Perspectives. He's taught at Georgetown University, Duke University, University of Buenos Aires, Australian National University, Tulane, Columbia, and Johns Hopkins universities. In 2018, he spoke in dozens of US and Canadian cities as part of a Venezuela Solidarity tour. Our fourth speaker is going to be Abena Disro. Abena traveled to Venezuela in August of 2023 for 2 weeks, where she visited and worked in several communes. She's the president and founder of the Neighborhood Empowerment Working Success and Voices with Vision, a performance ensemble. Abena Disro is a spoken word artist, playwright, radio broadcaster, conflict revolutionist, leadership development trainer, children's storyteller, asset mapping specialist, restorative justice worker, community activist, gardener, photographer, healer of people and communities, and much, much more. And finally, ending tonight is going to be Juliana Barnett. Juliana is an anthropologist, activist, writer, and cultural worker, active in many anti-imperialist struggles in Latin America. In 2019, with the Embassy Protection Collective, she helped defend the Venezuelan embassy from Trump, Guaido, and the Venezuelan right wing. In Venezuela, she was an election observer and a participant witness in several communes, including Vanessa's commune of the Cinco Fortalezas, where she's working with communards on creating a collective history of their experience. So I believe we're going to begin with Vanessa. Vanessa, para la traducción hay que hacer clic en el icono del globo a la parte inferior de Zoom y ahí escoger el idioma español. Igual eso fue solo una introducción de las personas que van a hablar y ahorita queremos que comiences tú con tus palabras, por favor.
Buenas noches, saludos a todos y a todas. Muy importante
Adelante,
estar
Vanessa,
hoy
se escucha bien.
presente como panelista, compartir con ustedes, pues acá ejemplo de lo que nosotros y nosotras estamos haciendo en Venezuela, las comunas, con todo lo que estamos viviendo en nuestro país. Pero más sin embargo aquí está un pueblo.
Mm.
Schiffer.
Our speaker in Venezuela
camera.
is frozen.
Vanessa, quizás puedes apagar la cámara porque se está congelando.
Vanessa is in a rural commune, and there is a lot of problems with the electricity there, and so we may be having some connectivity issues with her.
She dropped off. Well, let's continue and then we'll
Yeah.
bring Vanessa back.
Yeah.
Why don't I go with my remarks? So we're here tonight, obviously, because there's been, in part, because there's been a deployment of the U.S. Military to the Caribbean Sea. And actually, when Juliana and I were first talking about this webinar, this panel discussion, the deployment hadn't happened. So we had conceived of something else, but now we're forcing ourselves to kind of switch tacks a little bit, at least for my remarks, because it's a very dangerous situation what's happening. We've already had at least 14 people die in 2 different strikes by the Trump administration on boats that were in international waters. And this is causing a lot of an uproar, not just internationally, but also here in the United States, because this attack was very clearly contrary to international law and arguably against US law as well, because due process is supposed to extend to everyone, not just to US citizens and not just territorially within the United States. And of the 2 strikes, we know that there's already a lot of questions. On the first strike, the boat apparently was turning around, and this is according to one of the officials, senator, I believe, that was briefed on a strike. So the boat saw an aircraft and was apparently scared of it and began to turn around, and then afterwards they were bombed. They were attacked several times. This was 11 people that were killed, and it's not clear at all, first of all, that they were drug traffickers or that there were any drugs on board. Secondly, even if that had been the case, what international law calls for is for this ship to be intercepted and seized and the people arrested, not to be summarily executed. So this was very much an extrajudicial killing. And the United States did it again a couple of days ago with a second boat with 3 people aboard. And this boat appeared in the videos that President Trump very kind of boastfully showed on social media. This boat appeared to not be moving at all. So it's clearly not a threat to the United States. But to understand really what's going on here, I think it's important to debunk some of these claims, the pretext for this new war on drugs that's really becoming kind of a war on terror in Latin America. And the framing of it is the first thing that we have to pick apart, because Trump is saying that Venezuela is controlled by narco terrorists. And when we break this down, we can very clearly see, first of all, that Venezuela has never engaged in any sort of terror attack, right? And then in terms of this narco claim, we should also really point out that Venezuela produces 0 coca leaf, it produces 0 cocaine. There's no production or trafficking of fentanyl or other opioids that go through Venezuela. And according to not just UN figures, but to the DEA itself, only about 5% of global cocaine transits through Venezuela. The vast majority, 87% of global cocaine, goes through the Pacific. In fact, the number 1 producer of cocaine is Colombia. the #1 transit country, 70% of the cocaine goes through Ecuador, and that's according to Ecuador's own figures. So Venezuela is being targeted not because of cocaine, but because of geopolitical reasons and because the U.S. is interested in regime change. I'm not keeping track of my time, so hopefully Juliana is keeping track for me. But I also just want to briefly mention that these, the Trump administration earlier this year named two organizations as foreign terrorist organizations, the Tren de Aragua and the Cartel de los Soles. And I want to talk briefly about those because the Tren de Aragua, first of all, is not even considered to be a cartel by the DEA. The DEA characterizes the Tren de Aragua as conducting small-scale drug trafficking operations. And that's in the DEA's National Drug Threat Assessment Report of 2025. So even the DEA knows that the Tren de Aragua does engage in mass drug movement. In fact, in a National Intelligence Council memo that was released earlier this year, they very specifically write, and this is a quote, "The Maduro regime probably does not have a policy of cooperating with TDA and is not directing TDA movement to and operations in the United States." This contradicts the very narrative that President Trump is putting forward. And in terms of the Cartel de los Soles, what's really amazing here is that this is an absolutely fictional cartel. There's absolutely no evidence it exists. It began, the rhetoric about this Cartel de los Soles is sourced to an anonymous source in an article in the Miami Herald in 2005. In that same national drug threat assessment that I mentioned earlier, it dedicates 13 pages to transnational cartels. There's absolutely zero mentions of the Cartel de los Soles. In fact, if you go back to these drug threat reports, going back 15 years to 2010, all the publicly available ones, there's not a single reference to the Cartel de los Soles. So it's a fiction designed to tie the Maduro government to drug trafficking when no such ties exist. And it's the pretext being used by the Trump administration in its threats against Venezuela. I think we have Vanessa back. So Vanessa, si quieres continuar con la palabra, adelante, por favor.
Sí, bueno, pido disculpas primero porque no tenemos muy buena señal, pero quería decirles pues que compartir con ustedes que estamos en un momento muy difícil en nuestro país. La coyuntura es sumamente difícil con todo este tipo de amenazas, con todo lo que diariamente estamos viviendo, preparándonos pues. Aquí está el pueblo preparándose, alistándose para cualquier episodio que tengamos que nosotros poder enfrentar en nuestra patria. Pero sumamente difícil, el pueblo venezolano ha venido, pues, nos cuesta mucho y se nos quiebra quiebra nuestra voz en contar que hemos pasado tantos procesos a través de esos bloqueos, esas medidas coercitivas que bastante nos ha perjudicado y que vemos hoy en día que aún no cesan las agresiones, que aún no cesan el nivel de que quieren seguir haciendo daño a ese gobierno.
It's hard to hear, so listen still. It's a neat translation.
On the Zoom.
Oh, I think is she back?
It's kind
I know.
Should we continue with Steve and ask her to try to reconnect? Sure, Steve, why don't you go ahead? If you could point the microphone towards you.
Okay. Yeah, 6 minutes is really little time to talk about imperialism and its effect on Venezuela. So let me jump right in. The first point that I want to make is with regard to the importance of the solidarity movement and the potential, because, at this time there are demonstrations, protests against the US government in thousands of cities throughout the country on a daily basis. And so there is a potential there. But unfortunately, most of those protests are focused on domestic issues, and that I believe is a liability. But nevertheless, there's a great potential there. And the potential is that there are common denominators, and perhaps the most important common denominator, and Leo made reference to this, is with regard to what you could call the big lie. The big lie is actually a term that Hitler used. And in Mein Kampf, he said that the big lie attracts more people than small lies. The big lie is more effective. And that, is contrasts with half-truths. Half-truth can be 50% of the truth. It could be 60%. It could be 40%. But as Leo pointed out, with regard to the accusations against Venezuela and the narrative that's coming out of Washington, the justification for the rhetoric and the actions on the part of the Trump administration, there's no truth at all. And so that is a common denominator, because the people who are protesting, the people in the Democratic Party, the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party, the centrists of the Democratic Party, they all harp on the big lie with regard to the 2020 elections. That's not a half-truth. Those elections were not fraudulent. It's a black and white kind of situation. And I think that a connection can be made between that big lie with regard to the 2020 elections and other domestic issues and what's happening with Venezuela, the narrative about the drug trafficking, the Cartel de los Soles. Recently, the New York Times published an article in which they interviewed two people from WOLA. WOLA is an NGO. It's anti-Chavez, it's anti-Maduro completely. And they said, and this backs up what Leo just mentioned, that the Cartel de los Soles is a term that's referred to corruption involving the military. In other words, it's a term, it's a generic term. It doesn't refer to an organization. And in that sense, what Trump is saying about the Cartel de los Soles, which is behind the drug trafficking that arrives to the United States, that is completely false. The lack of specifics. The 2020 elections, no specifics as to prove concrete proof with regard to the fraud that supposedly took place. And the same with regard to the killing of these 11 men and then now 3 more. So we're talking about at least 14 people who were killed. No specifics. We don't know their names. We don't know anything about, Trump said that, the government knows that they're connected with, that they belong to the Tren de Aragua. They have all the information about them. And yet we don't even know the names. They haven't even revealed the names of these 14 people. The only thing we know about those 14 people in the incident comes from TikTok. That's the extent of it. So that's the first point that I want to make. There is a tie-in that I think the solidarity movement can take advantage of, can exploit, in order to try to reach out and draw in larger sectors of the population, specifically the people who are protesting. The people who are protesting on domestic issues, they should be brought into the conversation, and those protests should also take in foreign issues, Gaza, Palestine, the sanctions against Cuba, and certainly Venezuela. The second point that I want to make is that what is happening with regard to Venezuela is nothing less than a war. there's a war on Venezuela, just like there's a war on Cuba. That's been going on in the case of Cuba for 60 years now. And that's important because the situation with Venezuela is different from that of other progressive governments in Latin America. You know, the United States has had a hostile position to Lula, and that has become evident recently with the tariffs that were slapped on Brazil. But there's no comparison between what's happening with Venezuela, what's happening in Brazil or Argentina when the Peronistas were in power, or other progressive governments, because the war in Venezuela, and I don't think I have to go into specifics with regard to everything that's happened in Venezuela since 2002, since the two regime change attempts in 2002, the abortive coup attempt in April, and then the general strike, then the so-called guarimba. But a lot of people think that the guarimba, which was street violence in order to achieve regime change in 2014 and 2017, a lot of people think that, you know, okay, that happened twice. It didn't happen twice. It's happened throughout the Chavez period, and now especially under Maduro. These are protests, violence, with the aim of bringing about regime change. So that this is an important point to make, because there is a current of opinion that is supposedly coming from the left, supposedly. And that narrative is that Maduro is no different from the neoliberal opposition in Venezuela, and that, you know, that, okay, the sanctions are bad, but still Venezuela should maintain liberal democracy. Well, the fact of the matter is that democracy has been maintained in Venezuela, and Maduro ought to be congratulated for that, because any other country, or at least most countries throughout the world, if they were subject to the same hostility, to the same aggression, to the same war that Venezuela is subject to, they would have gotten rid of democracy. Democracy has been maintained. What the political scientists call the loyal opposition, that is the opposition that recognizes the legitimacy of democratic institutions in Venezuela, they have all the rights in the world, all the democratic rights in the world. But these supposed leftists who are claiming that Maduro, placing Maduro in the same bag as Maria Corina Machado on the right, they just assume that Maduro can, you know, maintain the same degree of democracy as existed in the past. But the fact of the matter is that Maduro has taken off the kid gloves, and he's had to, in order to maintain the sovereignty, defend the sovereignty of Venezuela. The last point that I want to make, I'm not keeping track of time, but I'll keep this short. The last point, and that is that why is Venezuela being singled out? Why is Venezuela a target? And, you know, some analysts correctly point out that geopolitics has something to do with it. The United States wants to maintain Latin America in accordance with the Monroe Doctrine, is our backyard. And that has something to do with it. But it's not the only factor. Maduro has maintained close relations with Russia and China, and the United States doesn't accept that. But it's not the only factor, because if that was the only factor, the United States would try to woo Maduro in Venezuela, make some kind of effort in order to try to, you know, get Venezuela back into the pro-US camp. So that's just part of the story. The other part, people talk about the oil, and that is also an important factor. In fact, Trump himself said after his first administration that he would have gotten a hold of the oil, that Biden blew it, because, you know, the oil, if he had maintained power after 2020, he would have gotten the oil. So the oil has a lot to do with it, but that's not the only factor either. Because, as I said before, that could be negotiated. It would be possible to establish some kind of terms whereby Venezuela would provide oil under lenient terms, perhaps, to the United States. There's a third factor and that has to be emphasized, and that is that Maduro represents a progressive model, a different model, an alternative model. And that's something that the Solidarity movement has to harp on. Again, those people who place Maduro in the same camp as Maria Corina Machado, they ignore the specifics of his policies, his foreign policy, which is a progressive foreign policy. Oil provided Cuba under very lenient terms. The fact that Venezuela, more than any other progressive so-called pink tide country, has clashed with the right-wing governments of Duque in Colombia, Bukele in El Salvador, Noboa in Ecuador, Milei in Argentina, Bolsonaro when he was president of Brazil. So the fact that the left has clashed with the right is an important factor that has to be brought out. And the other factor, and hopefully Vanessa Perez will be able to talk about this in detail, is on the domestic front. The communes and other examples of rank and file grassroots participation in decision-making, so that Venezuela, and I'll end with that, is in the crosshairs of the United States for a good reason. The Maduro government represents a model that the United States and global capital rejects.
Thanks, Steve. Let's see let's see if we can get Vanessa back and we'll keep trying.
You were suggesting that you take out the video. Is she there?
Yes, is she here?
Vanessa,
Okay.
adelante, por favor.
¿Me escuchan?
Sí,
¿Me logran escuchar?
sí, perfectamente.
Bueno, totalmente escuchando toda la ponencia del compañero, totalmente de acuerdo. Pues yo, como vocera, pues, de un movimiento comunal, un movimiento comunero, que es la unión de los pueblos, de los territorios, de las comunidades, que a diario pues hacemos un trabajo importante, social, comunitario, del cual hoy estamos orgullosos. A pesar de todas las circunstancias que está atravesando nuestro país, nuestro presidente Nicolás Maduro hace muy grandes esfuerzos para mantener a nuestro pueblo a diario en trabajo, en movilización, en hacer cualquier cosa. Y hoy son el ejemplo de nuestro país, es ver la masa del pueblo, de las comunas haciendo. Nuestro presidente es un presidente que, bueno, que ha tenido pues circunstancias difíciles, pero que más aún no ha dejado de gobernar y que ha estado ahí pendiente del pueblo. Hoy el presidente Nicolás Maduro hace transferencia de recursos directamente al pueblo para que sea el pueblo el que pueda hacer grandes obras y poder pues hacer y construir grandes cosas con el apoyo de los habitantes, y que nosotros mismos podamos hacer con muy pocos recursos, hacer grandes obras aquí en nuestro país. La situación es sumamente dura para nosotros y nosotras, pero más, sin embargo, bueno, aquí estamos resistiendo, estamos de frente con la producción, estamos innovando, creando, y muy importante la forma organizativa que estamos realizando, la forma organizativa de las mujeres, del pueblo comunero, que hoy estamos aquí a pesar de todas las dificultades y a pesar de lo que estamos atravesando, y que diariamente nos envían un mensaje, que diariamente el gobierno de Trump pues amenaza constantemente a Venezuela. Y bueno, estamos a la tentación. Aquí está un pueblo y aquí estamos nosotros pues trabajando y demostrando pues la fuerza comunitaria de los espacios. Las comunas hoy en día pues son ejemplos son ejemplos a nivel nacional y, y hemos podido mostrarles a los visitantes, a las brigadas que nos visitan acá en nuestro país, nuestras grandes experiencias de cómo mujeres se pueden organizar de forma colectiva para hacer un, un proceso productivo, para poder, pues nosotros venimos venciendo poco a poco una guerra económica, una guerra donde se desaparece la comida, una guerra donde no hay medicina, una guerra donde nuestra familia se nos muere de enfermedad, de atención médica, por no tener, pues, por los insumos, porque no llegan los insumos, porque no llega la medicina de alto costo, porque no llega, pues, muchas cosas que estos bloqueos y que estas sanciones nos perjudican y que, bueno, aquí estamos nosotros haciendo y emprendiendo para poder contrarrestar esas cosas. Y hemos manifestado pues que aquí estamos resistiendo y aquí estamos hoy en día, nos mantenemos con un gobierno pues bolivariano, un gobierno totalmente socialista, al lado de un presidente que es un presidente pueblo y que bueno, que todos los días está al pendiente de su pueblo y que bueno, venimos formados con Hugo Chávez y, y nos unen las fuerzas de personas como ustedes que a diario llevan nuestras voces y que se solidarizan con nuestro país y que a diario cambian el tema comunicativo y transmiten otro mensaje y transmiten la realidad de que hoy aquí en Venezuela tenemos. La realidad es que a pesar de todos los problemas que tenemos, aquí está un pueblo organizado, aquí está un pueblo que trabaja diariamente y, y una forma muy importante de la organización, movimientos nacionales, el movimiento de la Unión Comunera, un movimiento como se suma al nivel nacional, comunas de todo el país, a levantarse, a unirnos más y abrazarnos más como con fuerza con nuestro país. Entonces, muy importante, quiero agradecer pues este gran programa con ustedes y que nos permitan pues compartir y también decir pues la realidad que estamos viviendo. Lo que debe de decirse no se dice en esos medios de comunicación, los atropellos que vivimos a diario, las amenazas que vivimos a diario. Pero sé que hay un pueblo que está detrás, que sabe, que cree en nosotros y que nos ayuda a transmitir esos mensajes como son ustedes, que, que tenemos mucho que agradecerles por solidarizarse con nuestro país y con nosotras, con las mujeres, con los niños, con todos los que estamos acá de este lado. Un abrazo y bueno, si me permiten más adelante hacer un cierre, aquí estoy pendiente y bueno, saludos.
Como no, muchas gracias, Vanessa, por tus palabras. Y ahora vamos a escuchar a Abena Disro. So thanks very much to Vanessa for those words. And now we'll be hearing from Abena Disro.
Peace and blessings to everyone that's here and the ones that are listening via the internet. Venezuelan communes, of course, are about survival, but they're also about building people power, people empowerment. There, I saw in everyone that I met, not only did they live, but they practice it, the us and the we. I did not see the I and the me. In Venezuela, communes play a crucial role in the Bolivarian Revolution, serving as grassroots organizations that manage social services and production. As of 2025, it has been reported that there are nearly 3,600 registered communes in Venezuela, with a significant number actively engaged in the self-managed production and social services. My personal experience, I was there for 2 weeks while visiting a few of the communes in Venezuela. One of the communes, the Beehive commune in Caracas, Venezuela, there were teams that were developed there. We had workshops and whatnot. We developed teams. My team was the reporting team. I interviewed several of the community leaders, and all of the community leaders were sharing with me their experiences of living in a commune, building a commune, and people coming together, supporting each other in a way that was really needed. I met the cultural group of elders, which they called themselves the cultural dancing grannies. It was a group of elder women, and they're very proud of their culture. And they teach the youth from early age to know, to learn, and participate in their rich culture. In the city of Barcelona, we visited an arts building where we were greeted with the art of Capoeira, a world famous performance group, also, which I was also invited to perform right after them, which afterwards they asked me to join their group. That was a highlight. We visited a recycling plant where they manufactured a material that looked like a plastic, but it was stronger than wood. And the point they kept making was it would never rot. I met two women, they were twin sisters who were community leaders, which we shared a lot of stories and information. And they're at their home, they fed us, they cooked, and it was really beautiful. I love the way the people in Venezuela greet you and bring you in as if you are a part of their family. And that's the way I grew up because my mother had 11 children. There were 13 people in our house all my life until the time that I left to go to college. So there was much excitement with sharing the stories, the poetry, the culture, and it was accepted wholeheartedly from the heart and the spirit, and not only the people there who were from the U.S., but from the Venezuelan people. Another commune, Cinco Fortalezas, uh, what I experienced there, the communes organized local production and distribution of food and other necessities, providing a buffer against the effects of economic sanctions, hyperinflation, and national supply chain failures. Surplus for social projects, profits generated by communal enterprises which they can be reinvested into the community for social projects such as building homes, schools, and recreation facilities or funding care for the elderly. While there, they had built a school, they built many things inside of this commune, and it was beautiful. We painted the schools, all these different bright colors that I know the children were going to be so happy to see when they finally started school. I stayed overnight. We stayed overnight. Juliana was there also. And I lived in a very small house with an elder lady and her granddaughter who was being taught the cultural dances and singing of Venezuela. And she tried to teach them to me. I remember a little bit of it. But these dances were performed for our group one evening by her and a youth male. I think they were around the ages of 10 and 11. And they did a performance with that. And it was it was rich in their culture, I could tell. And also while there, I visited the sugarcane fields and I watched the sugarcane being processed as the sugarcane juice is being extracted. Now I'm talking about these things because I was asked to come here to talk about my own personal experience while being there, what I witnessed, what I felt, what I received, what I was able to give. And while I was there, an elder lady communicated to me that her daughter needed a new heart. Well, I guess she never received a heart because I just found out recently that young lady, her daughter, passed about 2 or 3 days ago. She also showed me her leg, which was very red, and after viewing it, I could tell that there was a lot of inflammation in her leg. So I went all around the commune asking people, could they take her to a doctor, take her somewhere? So the next day, they took her to a doctor, and 2 days after that, they gave her a medication for her leg, which she needed. And they said that if she hadn't received that medication, that most likely she would have died. So I felt like me being there, I was meant to be there. But the thing that felt the most uh, warm to me inside of my heart and spirit is that they were so free, sharing their culture, their love, and I was able to give something back, like saving a life. And so that's something I'll never forget. Now, it was wonderful getting back to the basics of going out. Like here we go out, we go to the restaurant, we go to eat, we have drinks. There, going out in the communes was so beautiful. It's like jumping off of a cliff into the waters and playing and swimming and bathing in the waters and the rivers of Venezuela. That was the best night out I could have. It took about a half a mile to walk there, a half a mile to walk back. So it was very healthy. Venezuela communes offer several positive aspects, particularly regarding grassroots democracy, economic self-management, and community resilience in the face of national crisis. These self-governed communities operate as bottom-up political and economic entities, allowing the residents to collectively address their own needs. They have transferred decision-making power from state bureaucracies to local communities, empowering residents to determine their own future. And to me, that is so powerful. Participatory decision-making. Residents actively participate in monthly assemblies and communities and committees to decide on projects, resource allocation, and community finances based on self-management and localized production. Elected spokespersons are rotated regularly, promoting broad participation, which keeps everybody on the same page, and everybody has feel like they're invested in each and every one of them collectively. And also, I witnessed, and what I saw was there's a great order in their system for the greater good of not I and me, but we and us. There's a great order for all of the people. Other things that I witnessed was part of a breakfast, lunch, and dinner being prepared every day. It didn't come from one kitchen, but collectively, someone cooked something here, someone picked the fresh fruit, made the juice, and collectively, they fed all of us. And that teamwork was so beautiful to see. While visiting there, I find the communes to be a positive force that reinforces that we are in this together, which fosters the knowing that whatever happens, no matter what, we are in this together, that everyone's voice is heard and everyone's voice is counted, which is not the case many times in organizations here that thrive in the US, nor the mindset of the people who govern these organizations through titles and popularity. It didn't seem like nothing like that. They worked so together, but it wasn't a struggle to work together. There was a town hall meeting that Juliana and I went to. The entire community was there to give reports and participate in the ideas. Now, I'm about to go over time, so let me see how I would like to end this. I saw that there was a greater learning in human development. The process of communal governments is seen as a school where people learn to socialize their potential and collectively manage resources. And within this process, holistic development takes place by prioritizing need over profit. Communes aim to foster all around human development and more creative work rather than focusing on constant economic growth. So it's a lot I could say, but I'm going over time, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Avena. So I will finish up, except that at the end we will hear again from Vanessa to talk about her commune in Sucre in northeastern Venezuela. But I want to say a little bit more about communes and about solidarity. Communes as a unit, a bedrock of anti-imperialist struggle. And how is this possible in Venezuela? Like how are they constituted such that they are part of this nationwide struggle and international? Because it's an interesting question, because communes in many places, including this country, communes tend to be isolated units. People they can be very progressive and good places for people to live, people who adapt to that kind of collective living, but they have extremely limited, very limited influence in the larger culture, and people, and their participation is rarely seen. In Venezuela, communes are part of the national project of the Bolivarian Revolution that started just about 25 years ago. And it was first stated by the first president of the revolution, Hugo Chavez, that the commune is has that role. And this is something that has been in development. It's not something that has happened all at once, because communes, there are thousands of communes in Venezuela, but the process of developing them into what Abena was talking about, productive places where the people of that area make decisions together, work on various sorts of production, whether it's sugarcane, whether it's fish production, whether people are able to mobilize for different things. That is something that has had to be really worked on with, with great effort and against a lot of pressure internally. For example, the Cinco Fortalezas commune that we both stayed at, where Vanessa is from, they have had to, in addition to the overall question of being victims or being targeted by the blockade and all of the other aggression from the U.S., they have had to deal on a local level with with landowner who worked very assiduously against having the farmers be able to take control of their own production. But that is what they're working on doing and managing now to a great extent. So the communes in Venezuela are not isolated utopias. They are, they are linked, and they're linked in what Vanessa will also say a little bit more about, which is the Unión Comunera, a union at the level of the country, where they organize, they support, and they talk with the people in the commune about how to best organize the councils, how to do all of the things that are needed to do to get for their production, for the connection with with other communes and with the state. And here we have what is extremely different from what we experience and what most capitalist countries experience, which is that the state is a promoter and is the foments the commune, and this and like, for example, when we were there in 2023, the sugarcane production, they were making this brown sugar, and that they were had a lot of trouble selling. They they had to accept low prices, and the government sent a truck, and they did a deal directly with the government in order to purchase large quantities and find a better outlet for their product. And again, this is something that it is in process. When I was there a few months ago as an elections observer, the commune now had their own truck, a smaller truck, but it was their own truck. And so the government was no longer sending their big truck to do that. They had, they had developed further in the arrangement. And but this is the kind of thing that is going on. But again, this is not top down. It is something that is developed through participatory democracy, again, which is not something that is perfect and something that has already been laid out and according to some blueprint. It really is something that is being developed. And we, this is something that we saw when I was there recently. We're doing a project, a creative writing project. And we had with Vanessa and many other people from the commune, and we sat together and talked about it and talked about what we are, developed the project. And afterwards, I asked, so how did you all, I mean, most of them are farmers or they're doing some other kind of production work. How did you all just get to do that in the middle of the day? And they said, well, it was considered commune work. And that, and the commune decided that that was, good work that should be done. And, this is something that is, kind of unheard of in the way that we do things. So I just want to, and this kind of atmosphere that other people have talked about is what is a good part of what makes it possible to mobilize in a short amount of time. I guess maybe you have heard about how much mobilization there has been to oppose or to resist the U.S. Threats in the Caribbean. They don't know what is going to happen, but many people are signing up to be part of the defense of the country. This is not something that would be possible or allowed under a dictatorship. That's really something that is seems fairly obvious. I want to say, just to end, something about solidarity, about what solidarity means and it should mean or can mean in this country, in the belly of the beast, which is, in other words, where we're in this contradictory situation that we're working for social transformation, but at the same time, we are part of this behemoth, this juggernaut that's crashing through the world. And, because the US is doing these, is being imperialist around the world, not only in Venezuela, obviously, although as Steve mentioned, more pointedly, more violently against countries that have really definitively chosen a path, an independent path, like Venezuela and some other countries have done. But our goal, what I believe that is incumbent upon us, is to, rather than nitpick and criticize the internal politics, we need to inform ourselves. And now we're not going to go blindly after any kind of we are trying to get as much information from as many sources as possible, but we need to be open-minded, we need to be respectful. These are the things, as we have a specific and particular reason to be respectful, because we are part of this power that tends to throw its weight around the world. And we have to remind ourselves of this, right? And so, and the other major responsibility that we have is to resist, to be aware of, to do whatever we can to resist the narrative that we are surrounded by. I mean, we really have to, it's not easy. We have to have to be really make an effort to note I mean, there's very clear lies, but there's a lot of sort of fuzzy information that is, I mean, like Steve was saying, things that sort of seem maybe, oh, maybe, but are really completely false. but but we just need to, because we are surrounded by it, and it's everywhere, it's the New York Times, but it's, it's everywhere. And so this is a major responsibility that we have. So just to conclude, we need to, we need to do those things in order to create, which I think is the goal, a different relationship with the peoples of the world, an equal relationship. We need to get out from under, get unchained from this relationship that we are forced into, not that we chose it, but because of where we are based, our material, where we materially are, and what is done in our name with our taxes, that we, it's, so in other words, that is, I believe, the major task of US solidarity, is to be very alert and do whatever we can to get out from under this weight that we have of being denizens of empire, and create, through a whole series of things that I think we can talk about in our final round, create a new and different, equal, respectful relationship with the peoples of the world, and most importantly, resist. We need to turn around and become, to stand with them against the targeting that is happening, and that, so that we are resisting like them. It's almost like we're putting ourselves on the side of the peoples of the world, and the empire is over here. The empire is our enemy, our adversary, just as much as it is theirs. And that, oh, just one more thing, and that is as important to us as it is to them. That need for a different relationship to the world is, we really need that for our survival and for the world's survival.
Why don't we do each of us very brief concluding remarks, and then we'll let Vanessa speak for a couple more minutes and then go to Q&A. Does that sound
Okay.
good? Sure. So I just want to briefly note two things. One is a set of polls that have been recently came out. In Venezuela, there's a pollster linked to the opposition called Data Analysis. They found that only 3% of Venezuelans would support military action of the United States against Venezuela. Another poll, Interlaces, found that 93% of Venezuelans reject these US threats of invasion. So clearly, very wide opposition to what the United States is doing in Venezuela. There was a poll came out last week from YouGov here in the United States that found 62% of Americans oppose an invasion of Venezuela. So that's really great news, because we're clearly the majority in both countries, so the people that want peace, and that it's going to offer opportunities to hopefully to ensure that nothing more serious happens. And then finally, I think when we're looking at this threat against Venezuela with this military deployment, we have to consider that it's not going to stop in Venezuela, right? If they start bombing supposed narco terrorists in Venezuela, they're going to do the same thing in Colombia, in Mexico. It's going to be kind of the war on terror, the drone wars brought from West Asia to South America, Latin America. And, that's going to create chaos and instability throughout the region. So hopefully everyone listening is going to join with us in trying to stop this however we can. Would you like to give some final remarks, Abena?
Well, I would just say that with the communes, throughout the communes, there's a great building, a community and solidarity. The communes build new social relationships based on mutual aid and collective work, which contrasts with the individualistic, profit-driven values of capitalism. And something really important, the collective management of their resources within the communes. It supports a more equitable and needs-based distribution of goods rather than relying on market forces that they collectively use their gifts and their talents to bring in profits to the communes. Everybody has a talent and they collectively assess their talents. They use their talents, like in one of the communes where someone built a big business. They had the truck with the label on it and everything, the sugar cane. And actually myself and Juliana, we have to put the labels on the sugar cane that was about this long, wrapped it up for distribution to be sold elsewhere to bring monies into the commune. So using your gifts and talents, they figured that out. That's just a really great asset. That's all I'll say for right now. And it was beautiful to watch.
Okay, I just wanted to pick up on something that Leo mentioned, that the survey that Leo mentioned with regard to the fact that just 3% of the Venezuelan population supports innovation. That survey was done by the leading pollster, one of the leading pollsters of Venezuela, Luis Vicente Leon. And Leon is not pro Maduro, is completely identified with the opposition. But I think it's important to keep in mind that the opposition itself is very much divided. That's one of the advantages that the Maduro people have. It's the Chavista movement is united. The opposition is very much divided. But I think it's important to point out that part of that division is due to the fact that some of the people in the opposition overtly support an invasion, overtly supports the narrative coming out of Washington with regard to supposed drug trafficking on the part of the Maduro government. And yet there are other sectors of the opposition that reject that completely reject that, reject the idea that a cartel de los soles exists, because obviously it doesn't. But the fact of the matter is that Washington has consistently supported the fringe. That goes back to Leopoldo Lopez at the time of the first so-called Guarimba in 2014. That was the case with Guaido. They both belonged to a fringe party that's called Voluntad Popular, that is really a very small party in Venezuela. It always has been. And then after that, Maria Corina Machado, who also represents the right-wing, overtly pro-neoliberal opposition. So Washington is behind a sector of the opposition. But today something interesting is happening, and that is that the other half of the opposition, and the fact that that half has the support of the majority of people when it comes to the issue of a possible U.S. invasion or military action in Venezuela, they are supporting Maduro in that. Today's news, breaking news, the governor of Cojedes, who is an opposition, one of the few opposition governors in Venezuela, he spoke at a meeting expressing his opposition to an invasion. So there's a unity that's taking place, and it involves the vast majority of Venezuelans and sectors, important sectors of the opposition in terms of the leadership of the opposition. So just one other thing, I just want to express again my amazement at the fact that what's happening in the United States today, there is so much opposition to this government on so many different issues. I have gone to numerous protests, and I go to one in particular near where I live in Rockville. And I go there almost every Saturday. There's a protest involving, between 100 and 150 people. And I'm really surprised at the fact the diversity of slogans, the diversity of signs that are out there. And yet not one deals with issue of foreign policy. Not one deals with really the most important issue of them all, which is Palestine. But none on with regard to Venezuela or anything dealing with foreign issues. And that's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence at all, because there is a polarization in this country. And that polarization involves foreign policy. And you see the Democratic Party, the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party, with good positions on domestic issues, but very lukewarm position on the position of on the issue of Palestine, and very little about Venezuela. So, but there's a potential there, and that's the point that I want to make. There's a potential, and I think that that potential has to be exploited.
Mm.
Yes, I only want to say that I totally agree that there is part of the narrative, you might say, the way that they have us compartmentalized is in terms of domestic and foreign policy. There's been times when it's kind of broken through, but this is not one of them. But that is because there is a huge attack, because Palestine is so much in the forefront. I mean, the attacks, as we know, are really strong, and I mean vicious. And so this should be a clue that of how important this aspect is to the class identity, the class makeup of what of the rulers, the billionaires, the people who are basically in charge of the imperialist state that we're living. That is a place that they simply do not want us to touch. And so that is really a clue that we need to do that very thing. And one thing that I think is really important is to connect the various groups and movements for solidarity, because we have Venezuela, we have El Salvador, we have the various Latin American countries, but they tend to work independently. I mean, you have to, I sing also, and I get invited to go to the Peruvian embassy, to the Salvadoran embassy, and to various and there are people from those basically those groups. And that is something that is, I mean, we should all be supporting the people of El Salvador who were, suffering, terrible repression and, basic fascism. We can see that Bukele is, Trump's best friend. Anyway, that is so, and so there's the potential is there, but we need to join these solidarity movements, and of course solidarity with Palestine. People here I mean, there is a lot of consciousness that it's basically the same struggle, but there's a long way to go on that. And so I'm hoping that the speakers will, Vanessa will close us out, but we want to send out afterwards some various readings and thoughts to the people who have signed up, which actually there's a lot of people are registered for this. So Vanessa.
¿Me escuchan?
Sí.
Ok. Bueno, sí, muy importante. La comuna 5 Fortaleza, la cual hoy yo represento acá a ustedes, es una comuna que, bueno, que ha pasado por muchos procesos. Venimos de una lucha de tierra, una lucha por la tierra del cual nuestros abuelos y abuelas, tíos y hermanos dedicaron pues su tiempo, su vida, siendo trabajadores de campo, y bueno, dedicaron toda su vida en esas tierras, y vemos que trabajaban para un terrateniente del cual los explotaba, pues. Y bueno, nosotros como comunidad organizada colectivamente vimos con mucha preocupación de que las tierras donde nuestros abuelos se dedicaron por muchos años a trabajar, a dejar sus manos, a hacer lo posible para poder enriquecer a una sola persona, la veíamos con preocupación de que nosotros queríamos pues tomar esos espacios para poder ser trabajados trabajo colectivo para poder generar recursos para el beneficio de las familias y de la comunidad en general. Luego del año 2019 logramos el objetivo de tener una adjudicación de tierra, tuvimos en nuestras manos una titularidad de las tierras que hoy en día están abajo, en manos de la comuna. Somos productores de caña de azúcar. Y bueno, después que tuvimos ese gran paso, que logramos ese objetivo, pues también nos tocó otro proceso más fuerte, que fue una estafa que tuvimos en el año 2021. Fuimos estafados por una empresa privada, el cual nos dejó a todos los productores de caña. En este caso, la comuna es una productora de caña, la mayoritaria en nuestro municipio en el cual nosotros habitamos. Y bueno, nos vimos después de una lucha que tuvimos una victoria de las tierras, pues vino otra tragedia para la comuna, que era la estafa, donde 176 productores perdieron toda su producción por arrimar a una empresa que después se fue a quiebra. Y bueno, lastimosamente nos tocó enfrentar una situación muy difícil. Luego de eso, pues nosotros viendo que pasaba el tiempo y que no podíamos quedarnos de brazos cruzados, decidimos avanzar y nos creamos una innovación de crear un espacio de transformación donde nosotros mismos podríamos procesar, transformar la caña de azúcar, y nosotras mismas y nosotros mismos, el pueblo, la comuna, ser encargados de transformar esa materia prima en un producto y que ya no viniera nadie a poder robarnos lo que tanto nos había costado. Y hoy en día pues tenemos un trapiche comunal que es como una mini industria donde se procesa la caña de azúcar y se convierte en un producto llamado comúnmente aquí papelón. Es un papelón derivado del azúcar, totalmente orgánico, sin ningún tipo de químicos. El campo, la tierra la estamos trabajando pues a fuerza de mano de obra, porque no tenemos cómo comprar los insumos muy costosos y son muy pocos los que llegan al país. Y bueno, trabajamos y todo está mayormente orgánicamente. Y como lo dijo Juliana, en ese momento que la brigada que Vinci estaba visitando nuestra comuna, que hacía un gran recorrido por varias comunas del país, comunas que han tenido, que tienen lo que tienen porque bastante lo han luchado y lo han trabajado. Nos ha tocado romper varios obstáculos y bueno, eso es lo que nos une a todas en la Unión Comunera, comunas que a diario realizamos una lucha y una entrega por poder nosotros demostrar de forma organizativa de cómo la comuna, a través de una fuente de producción económica, podemos decir que hoy en día estamos ayudando a nuestro pueblo revolucionario, a nuestro presidente y a nuestro país. Por ejemplo, hoy en día vemos que a través de esta pequeña industria, cómo podemos atender un consultorio médico, cómo podemos pintar una escuela, cómo podemos llevar un cuaderno, cómo podemos hacer una obra social en una comunidad, cómo podemos colocar un bombillo. Y de esa manera nosotros ayudamos a nuestro país y a nuestra revolución y a nuestro mandatario Nicolás Maduro, porque sabemos que en el trabajo y en lo productivo está la fuerza. Hoy en día nosotros podemos ayudar a través de esa empresa, de ese papelón que se llama papelón hecho en comuna. Estamos pues en 3.500 bodegas a nivel nacional, un producto a bajo precio, pero muy importante. La persona que compra este producto apoya pues a esta comunidad a poder hacer alguna inversión social. Y es todo un poco de la experiencia de cómo a través de lo que ha costado mucho, pues yo le contaba a todos los compañeros que bueno, que a mí me tocó resistir un momento muy difícil. En el año 2017, pues tuve una pérdida muy importante. Perdí a mi hija, se me murió mi hija, pues por no contar con los insumos médicos, por no contar con ni siquiera hacer un rayos X, porque no hay este, los reactivos necesarios en los hospitales, mucho trabajo. Ahorita poco a poco se consigue, pero me tocó sufrir, pues, me tocó vivir en un tiempo de resistencia muy duro, perder una vida y lo que más duele es perder un hijo. Y más sin embargo estoy aquí de frente y eso me dio más fuerza y más fortaleza para seguir luchando por mi país, para seguir luchando por mi comunidad, por mi comuna. Y bueno, aquí estamos al frente de este proceso comunal. La comuna es algo muy bonito, algo muy hermoso que se está haciendo aquí en Venezuela. La comuna, mira, es la construcción hacia el socialismo que soñamos, es eso. Y podemos decir que las comunas y un movimiento que está aquí en Venezuela, el movimiento de la Unión Comunera, donde hay una unión colectiva a nivel nacional, una fuerza increíble de las comunas que a diario luchan y que a diario hacen un trabajo muy bonito, orgánico, productivo, mira, cosas hermosas, pues nos juntamos todos y nos juntamos para poder salir adelante, salir adelante. Y contra ese imperio que hoy nos amenaza nuevamente, un imperio que no se queda tranquilo, que ha intentado y que está intentando pasar nuestras aguas, invadir nuestros espacios y que sabemos pues que cuál es su propósito en este país. Contra todo eso nosotros nos estamos preparando porque nosotros no pasarán, no permitiremos que pasen a nuestro país. En este país hay un pueblo que todavía, un pueblo de izquierda, que está bien formado y que mantiene una revolución y que mantiene un proyecto ideario y bolivariano. Lo vamos a defender como nosotros podamos con todo lo que tengamos que hacer. Y aquí está un pueblo en resistencia. Aquí está un pueblo en resistencia que no se dará por vencido. Y agradecer pues a todos ustedes, agradecer la solidaridad de los países, agradecer a las brigadas, agradecer a todo el cuerpo internacional que hoy está en solidaridad con Venezuela, con Palestina, con esos países de Latinoamérica que estamos también atravesando estas coyunturas, con nuestra amada Cuba. Aquí estamos y aquí estamos resistiendo y vamos para adelante. Nosotros tenemos un lema muy importante que es nuestra canción que se dice comuna o nada, independencia, comuna y socialismo. Y vamos para adelante, muchas gracias. Siempre importante escucharlos y ver y que puedan ustedes también poder en algún momento venir y conocer más a fondo nuestras experiencias. Totalmente complacidas con ustedes y un abrazo fuerte desde acá, desde la Comuna 5 Fortaleza y desde Venezuela y desde la Unión Comunera.
Oh, muchísimas gracias, Vanessa. Vanessa Pérez de la Unión de la Comuna 5 Fortalezas, the Five Strengths Commune. So now we're going to, so we started late and we said a lot. And so there are questions online and we want to be able, well, of the people who are with us online, who we welcome, wish we could see you, but we very, very much appreciate your being here. And so how do you want to?
Just reading the question.
Yes, so we'll just read we'll just hear the questions.
One person had two questions.
Of course, of course. Oh, but
Just, it's just information question. Is it legal to travel to Venezuela now? Can a US citizen go without being,
So,
government have some regulation that says if you go, I'm a retired we will withhold your social security.
The question is if it's legal. So I'm repeating it for the microphone. The question is if it's legal for U.S. citizens to travel to Venezuela currently. It is legal to travel to Venezuela. You do need a visa to enter Venezuela. A visa can be complicated. If you want to visit Venezuela, I suggest you join a delegation. That's the easiest way to go. Otherwise, to get a visa as a U.S. citizen, you would have to travel to Mexico and go to the Venezuelan consulate in Mexico, and that's not a certainty that they will grant it to you.
Thank
So
you.
you're welcome.
The first question, Bridget, what comparison do you draw between Venezuela and DC in terms of this administration's policy and ideology?
So the question is, what comparison do you draw between Venezuela and DC in terms of this administration's policy and ideology? I mean, I think I'll take a first, turn at that. I think we're seeing in DC is an occupation very clearly. It's a form of really of colonialism. And I think we've been talking about that in DC for many, many years. And that's what they're trying to do in Venezuela. And it's about controlling people as it is in many parts of the world. And I will also say this, it's interesting to me that the deployment of troops in DC happened right around the time that troops were deployed to the Caribbean. And it happened right around the time that Trump was under pressure because of Epstein, because of his terrible economic record, and because of scandal after scandal. So I see this as a distraction. But going back a little further, Trump talked a lot about crime on his campaign during his presidential campaign, and it was very hateful rhetoric against Venezuelans. But also, very clearly, he talked about crime in inner cities, and that's very, white supremacy code. It's anti-Black racism that he employs on a daily basis, and I think there's a lot of parallels there. And I appreciate that question. I don't know if anyone else wants to take a stab at it.
I think you nailed it. What's next?
What do the women of the global majority speaking tonight think is the role of white supremacy in this situation?
So the question is, what is the role of white supremacy in this situation? What do the women think of that?
There is certainly a direct link, in my mind at least, and I'm sure in those of many, between imperialism and colonialism and patriarchy. There is the need to control that Leonardo mentioned, and we're not talking kind of just a general control, a sort of a psychological control, though that is part of it. It's control, it's material control of resources, of people, of movement of people, of movement of money, and so, and white supremacy is, for one thing, it is an ideology that justifies this control of basically the entire world, certainly Latin American, the brown and Black peoples, and anybody who is not of a very, very, very particular hue, but it's not even, it's really of a very, very minute group of people who are simply convinced and act as if, and have the system is arranged such that they have a role of control, of management, and of the ability to feel that they are exceptional in all ways. And of course, that is parallel to the US exceptionalism. And and so it's a way that men, so it's not really about men, it's about a system of domination, a system of oppression that is it's part of this, is one of the pillars of this system of control. I don't know if you want to say something about it, but just one thing that so part of the way that is that this control is resisted, and so is by breaking through patriarchy. And so Venezuela and many of and in many countries, there is a direct link in the struggle of women and of resisting imperialism.
I think that's good. The next questions.
We have reading from Carlos Rivera, who's the executive director, Simon Bolivar Institute, and then
Oh, we have so the Simon Bolivar Institute from Venezuela sends its greetings with Carlos Rivera, I think it was. So I'm glad they were able to connect.
one is do they have communes in Cuba?
So the question is, do they have communes in Cuba? They're organized slightly differently in Cuba, so not in the way that Venezuela has communes. I think, Steve, I don't know if you have anything to add on that. Yeah, no. I mean, in Cuba, they're more organized into cooperatives in terms of productive enterprises. So the commune,
Sure.
yeah, if you, I mean, you don't have a mic, but come up on it and answer it.
Can y'all hear me? Okay, you should be able to hear me. So yeah, just Cuba is organized differently, but it also has a 66-year-old, about 66-year-old revolution. And they do have what started as the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution, the CDRs, that were neighborhood based, community-based organizations that were for defending the revolution in the beginning when the U.S. was trying to destabilize it. And since then, they've become integral part of Cuba's bottom-up democracy. Very popular democracy. They have them community-based. They have people's assemblies and all, and heads of the committees for the defense of the revolution, and even goes all the way up to a national structure that's integral part of the National Assembly. And so it's different in that sense. And you think that Venezuela's revolution about 20 years old, 26 years old. And so it's still, I guess you would think, I would maybe look at, and also different with the different political circumstances, in a sense you still have a formidable opposition in Venezuela, whereas in Cuba, like the right-wing opposition is basically neutralized and not really anything. Yeah, and they're exiled. So that's kind of
that was the voice of Net Freeman from the Black Alliance for Peace, who is helping us out tonight with this webinar. You can't see him on camera though, unfortunately.
Yeah, we just add that the what's interesting is that the people power, poder popular, takes different forms in different countries. The Movimiento Sin Tierra in the landless movement in Brazil, in Bolivia with the movement again towards socialism, and so it's we that's one of the indications that we really need to get into how each country is both different and what they have in common.
So the next one is this is Roger Harris says some of the speakers spoke about communes as being important engines of production, contributing to the national economy in addition to their political role. What percentage of the GDP is produced by the communes?
Yeah, I mean, I think. Oh, so what percentage of the GDP is produced by the communes? So because Venezuela is an oil producing country, any industry that is not related to oil is going to have a very small percentage of GDP. So I don't have those figures, but it's minimal because the economy is so dominated by oil.
But Vanessa, ¿quieres contestar también esa pregunta si escuchaste?
But let me also just add before Vanessa chimes in that it goes beyond GDP, right? Because what the communes have done is totally transform Venezuela's agricultural production. Venezuela went from importing roughly 80 to 90% of its food to now producing 90 plus, 95+% of its food. And one of the main drivers behind that were the communes. So more than contributing to the economy, the communes contributed to Venezuela being able to resist the brutal sanctions. And I also want to express my sympathy to Vanessa for the story she shared. You know, it's very strange to be on a panel and talking about Venezuela without really mentioning the word sanctions. But we know that the sanctions target children. And that's based on an article that came out in the Lancet last month, where the authors found that sanctions kill 560,000 people globally every year. And half of those are children. And so my heart goes out to Vanessa.
Yes.
Vanessa, si quieres responder, adelante.
¿Me pueden volver a ayudar a la pregunta? Disculpen ahí.
La pregunta es cómo contribuyen las comunas a la economía venezolana.
Sí, importante. Las comunas han priorizado eh, la producción, muy importante. Hoy en día podemos ver cómo se ha hecho pues el campo productivo una prioridad para las comunas. Producir por ese mismo tema, pues a través de la guerra económica, de las medidas coercitivas que tuvimos en el país, que primeramente fue en la escasez de los alimentos, pues hemos priorizado ahorita, la mayoría de las comunas están produciendo, están criando su propia proteína en aves, en bovinos, en porcinos, estamos produciendo nuestras propias harinas, realizando en este caso nosotros nuestra propia azúcar de un producto, o sea, porque estamos aportando pues a, a la producción comunal para poder ayudar desde las comunidades a contrarrestar esta situación económica que nos ha costado, pues que el tema de anteriormente vivíamos de una renta petrolera que no nos faltaba nada en el país, que nos llovía abundante comida, abundante alimentos, los supermercados, el dinero, pues y hoy en día pues las comunas priorizan el sistema productivo en cada territorio para poder apoyar y poder contrarrestar esta situación. Eh, también hemos priorizado eso, pues, y aportamos a la producción nacional. Venezuela vive ahorita una situación muy tensa que es la hiperinflación horrible de la moneda, pues vemos como el ataque directamente a la moneda nuestra, totalmente una situación crítica. Pero bueno, ahí vamos contrarrestando con el tema de, de las unidades productivas. Nosotros en la comuna tenemos 18 colectivos feministas que, que 12 colectivos producen pollo de engorde y 6 colectivos producen carne de cochino y distribuyen a todas las familias de la comuna. O sea, eso es un ejemplo de lo que se está haciendo en cada una de las comunas que son productivas, de cómo nosotros podemos nosotros mismos criar y atender y de una vez distribuir lo que hacemos para poder aportar esa proteína a cada una de las familias de, de las comunas. Y asimismo el café y asimismo muchas cosas. Entonces, ha sido una prioridad para las comunas el tema productivo.
Um, the, I just think that we should ask Vanessa to answer the question about women and patriarchy, because we didn't really, make that happen. So, Vanessa, ¿puedes hablar brevemente en cuanto al papel de la mujer? El papel, yeah, that's right. Sí, acerca de la cuestión de raza, de la supremacía blanca y de las mujeres.
Bueno, acá la experiencia feminista, nosotros estamos transmitiendo y estamos en la construcción de un feminismo comunal, un feminismo de inclusión, un feminismo de igualdad, de igualdad en los territorios, de participación igualitaria entre la mujer y el hombre, y rompiendo con las culturas, con esas culturas ancestral que más que todo son patriarcales. Y bueno, hoy vemos como ejemplo la participación, pues, las mujeres en los procesos productivos, administrativos, y el hombre, pues, acompañando también. Por ejemplo, el caso de la Comuna 5 Fortaleza, el trabajo fuerte, físico, los compañeros lo llevan, pues, porque el proceso de la caña de azúcar necesita mucha fuerza, pero más sin embargo la mujer puede empaquetar, puede, puede colocar la etiqueta, puede envasar, puede llevar la administración, contabiliza, lleva registro. Entonces, un feminismo de inclusión, participación y de igualdad, del cual nosotros estamos construyendo y el que estamos dando ejemplo en cada uno de los territorios. Pues
Y
nosotros
pueden, y
acá,
en cuanto a la supremacía blanca o racismo, en cuanto al papel que ves, que
no,
tiene en
eso es,
cuanto al ataque a ustedes o en cualquier, o sea, simplemente habla de
no,
eso.
eso aquí ha descendido mucho, no, no se ve ese ataque entre las razas, no, no se persiste eso acá en nuestras comunidades, en nuestros espacios, no, son eh, todo por igual, pues, nuestras diferencias de color, eso no existe aquí, eso ya hemos roto con eso, porque anteriormente decíamos que los negros eran los esclavos, pero eso no, ya no existe, pues en mi comunidad no lo existe. No le existe, somos igualitarios y se respeta cada una de nuestras razas y nos abrazamos cada una con nuestras razas porque somos razas de indios, somos razas de negros, somos razas de blancos, de todos y somos una sola hermandad.
Gracias, Vanessa. So I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions before wrapping it up.
Mm.
Next question, what do you say to those who claim that Maduro did not win the last election?
You should take that one.
Briefly, Steve.
There's a lot that can be said about that, and I won't go into the specifics with regard to the numbers, but I will say this, that one of the, the elections could not have been democratic to begin with, because
The question, say what the question.
the question is, how do you respond to somebody who says that Maduro was not elected democratically? The presidential elections took place on July 28th, 2024. And so the question is, how do you respond to somebody who places in doubt the official results of those elections? And the way I would respond to that, in order to, it really depends on the situation in which you're discussing that. If there's a long, extended discussion, you can get into a lot of details. But otherwise, what I would say is this, that how can you consider that elections can really be open and honest if the people who are voting have the sensation that they have a gun pointed at their head? And if they vote in favor of the opposition candidate that was the candidate of Edmundo Gonzalez, the United States would lift the sanctions. And if they voted for Maduro, the sanctions would continue just as they have in effect. So the elections to begin with had that problem. There were some people even opposition people who represent the more legitimate sector of the opposition that told Maduro that what he should do is to tell the country that that Venezuela would hold elections when the United States lifts the sanctions. And that's really something, I mean, to think about, because if the United States is really interested in democracy, which it isn't, but if it were, then they would, lift the sanctions against Venezuela, just like they would lift the sanctions against Cuba. As I said before, democracy and war are incompatible. In the case of Venezuela, you have both. You have a situation of war and you have democracy. But the extent to which people feel threatened, and a lot of people, I mean, I traveled to Venezuela. I used to live in Venezuela, and I can say that people will say that they're tired. They're tired. That they are less interested in politics than before because really they're struggling just to survive. I hear people who were silently pro Chavez and or pro Maduro say, I don't know who to vote for because of what I just said. If I vote for Maduro, the sanctions are going to continue and the situation is just insoportable, as they say in Spanish. So that I think is one response to that question, and it really depends on who's asking it, what the situation is, how much time I have to go into detail. But I think that's one thing to consider.
The final question.
One question that do you think the polarization of both parties on issues such as Venezuela, Palestine, Cuba is because both parties support empire?
Should I repeat the question? Or did they hear? Do you think the polarization of both parties, say, for example, on Palestine, Cuba, Venezuela, is because both parties support empire? I believe that was it.
Okay, that both parties support empire. I suppose the question is referring to the opposition. The Maduro government doesn't support empire, so I'm not.
I think he's Democrats and Republicans.
Oh, they talking about the United States. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I'm glad you clarified that. Well, yeah. The fact of the matter is that on domestic issues, there are important differences between the Democrats and Republicans. But on issues of foreign policy, it is true that at a particular moment, there may be differences between the two parties. But as a whole, the two parties are wartime parties. They're pro-imperialist parties. And, it's a little more complicated than that in the sense that there are factions within both parties that question that. But that if you look at the leadership of the parties, but both parties basically support imperialism. And I think that just, one last comment about that. When the phenomenon of Bernie Sanders began in the elections of 2016, I remember saying to, as a matter of fact, Jorge Arriaza in Venezuela, saying that, it's really amazing that somebody who is a socialist is really given a certain space to develop his ideas and to campaign as a presidential candidate. But that when it comes to imperialism, and Bernie Sanders is hardly an anti-imperialist, it's a whole different story. And so the conclusion that I would draw from that is that for the people in power, for the ruling class, or the people who are really calling their shots in this country at different levels, imperialism is more important than anything else. It's the overriding concern of those people who are in power because, they accept the socialist, at least in the case of Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and others. They attack them. They play dirty when it comes to their electoral ambitions, but at the same time, they're given a far different treatment than organizations that oppose imperialism. So that the conclusion that I would draw is that imperialism is an overriding issue And it's not one that the Democratic Party is really facing at all.
So I think that's all we have time for. I really want to thank folks for joining us in person and online. I also want to thank Netva and Sarah, who helped so much with the flyer and with organizing this event and the technical side of it. Hasmin and Yesenia are great interpreters, Juliana for organizing in general, and then our co-sponsoring organizations, which are the Claudia Jones School for Political Education, Code Pink, Friends of Latin America, the Venezuela Solidarity Network, and Juliana, last word.
Yes, well, we're going to close with a poem from our poet, Avena Dizro.
This poem is entitled I Am, You Are, We Are, from my book, Fire in the Spirit. Queen, kings, warrior, pioneers, communicator, leader, adventurer, woman, mother, protector, healer, consoler, confident, spiritual, strong, creative, energetic, positive, intuitive, nurturing, bold, beautiful, powerful, intelligent, funny, blessed, down to earth, elegant, mysterious, psychic, loyal. I am Queen Warrior Woman. There are many Queen Warrior men. For me, for you, for us. We must stand together. Back to back, shoulder to shoulder, hand to hand, chest to chest, supporting each other. Mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, economically, we must stand together. We must fight together. We must build together. So forge on and forge on and forge on for you, for us, and keep forging in unity, in unity, in unity.
All right. Well, I think that's all. Thanks so much to everybody for coming and for your questions. And again, very much thanks to everybody who helped with all the technical, with the interpreters, Netva, and everybody.